Well, this is Richard Gayton and Mitch McDonald, and we want to welcome you to Halo, Love, and Country. And this is where we, hopefully in an entertaining way, introduce you to many different issues around the risks of being an LGBTQ person, whether you're in the military or you're just navigating life in America, which has all of its difficulties with LGBTQ people. But anyway, we're going to go back to today in some of the history of gay people and LGBTQ people. Mitch has done some research about it. I've done some research. I ended up focusing more on some of the historical connections to the American military in some of our deep history. Mitch, what have you got for us today?
Well, I was just sort of, I was scaling through it, looking at, once you get past the Bible, where is the context for issues of homosexuality socially? Where's our facing on homosexuality? We know it comes up in the Bible. Jesus doesn't really get into it, but it's there. But that's a religious thing, and I don't necessarily want to talk to anybody's religion. Your religion's yours, whatever you got to do. Just historically, my stuff started about 130 CE, the current era. I don't have anything for BCE outside the Bible. I'm sure it's there. I just didn't stumble across it. BCE, before the current era, for anybody who wants to look at that, which is always a fun discussion. We were talking about that in class one day, and the kids were like, "Why did we go from AD to CE?" And I was explaining to them, AD, Anno Domini, that's Latin, and it's a religious context. And CE, Common Era, is just supposed to be sort of a scientific way to draw the line. And then fully realizing, as I said it, that the line is still in the same place. It's like,
just has a different name, doesn't it?
Yeah, and so it's pointless. It's like we currently have all these social issues around words you can't say, but we don't not say them. We just say them in a different way, which means you're still thinking the exact same information. I can say grape, but I can't say. I have to say SA, not sexual assault. I can say grape, but it's not appropriate to say rape. But we're talking about the exact same thing, and we know what it means. So, how does it, there are places socially where we're getting behind ourselves, rather we're trying to police feelings more than problems, which is problematic for me, but that's neither here nor there. So when I started looking back into the history, and the first thing I'm finding, and I'm going to go chronologically. So you tell me if you've got anything, if you want to talk about anything that happens earlier than 130 CE. That is currently where I'm at. And that is going back to the Greeks and Emperor Antinous, who, upon losing his favored lover, a young man whose name I am not able to find, basically started a death cult in the man's name to mourn the loss of his lover. Something very similar to what happened with Alexander when he died, when his lover died. And again, I don't remember who Alexander's lover was, but it's the exact same.
Hephaestion, that was his lover's name. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, the same idea that the entire world must mourn the loss of this beautiful soul. After that, I think my next big one is 9th century Iran, Abu Nuwas, which is okay. So, and that one I had a lot of trouble finding that particular issue. If you look at Iran now, it's a very religiously controlled, very repressive country regime currently, where homosexual behavior is violently punished. But in the 9th century Iran, in the 9th century in Iran, Abu Nuwas was writing publicly available, publicly praised poetry about gay love, about men and their strength for one another and the beauty of other men. And again, publicly praised for the quality of his poetry. Closest I get after that is actually, I should have been like 3rd and 4th century India. And India is always an interesting one because of the Hijra population. That, you know, they have had an acknowledged third gender for thousands of years. And that one's an oddity because in other places where trans people and gay people are sort of acknowledged, they're acknowledged on the level of you're human, you're like us, and, you know, in some cultures they're seen as better than. And India is the only one I could find that fell into an outside territory because the Hijra are respected as a separate third gender, but they're respected out of fear. It seems to be a process of they carry supernatural power, and disrespecting them will get horrible things visited upon you. So they're very low caste. They're in the untouchables range, but they are treated respectfully where normal untouchables are not, because they could visit punishments on you with their powers. Let's see. Native Americans, we have writings going back into the 3rd century, depictions and oral histories that talk about the Burdash women and passing women. So the Burdash would have been women who effectively lived in male roles in society, and the passing women were men who lived in women's roles in Native American society. And that goes all the way back, you know, that's pre-colonial by quite a bit. And I know we've all, you know, I've seen that spoken of in a lot of different locations, and I wasn't able to get real depth there, but it really just goes back to those parts of Native American society. You were appreciated for what you were capable of. If you were in what was considered to be a man's role and you did well, you were honored for doing it. And if you were in a woman's role as a man and you did well, and you were honored for doing it. And that's really what it came down to. Everybody was allowed to be what they were, to excel at what they could excel at. I would actually be curious to know where that stands in their societies today, but I did not dig into that. After that, we jump way forward. What are you looking at? I'm looking at like 1395. 1395 England. There was I went to EnglishHeritage.org, and there was a trial for a man who had been living as a woman with 2 other women, sort of in their cottage, off in the countryside, and it was just discovered that this woman was not a woman, and for whatever reason they put him on trial. Did not get a final result on that one. None of the records said whether he was found to be somehow in the wrong and was held accountable. After that, it jumps forward to the 15th century, and at that point, we're talking about King James, patron of the King James Bible, who was married to Queen Anne of Spain. They had 8 kids. I do not know exactly how many of them survived, but I know it was not 8. In a political marriage, they were not exactly tender towards each other toward the end of their marriage before she died. He was said to have had an affair with another woman who I don't have any information on. But after that, he had 3 male lovers successively. And there apparently are letters that suggest he had at least one male lover in his teen years before he got married. And there's the ongoing story there that, you know, the reason he commissioned the King James Bible was to get the church off his back about, you know, how he was living his life. he allowed the Roman Catholic Church to sort of step in and gain some strength and precedence, and they would leave him alone about how he chose to live his life. You guys can go be religious wherever you want, fight your little battles, live your little lives, just stay out of my bedroom. Which is probably a great deal when it really comes down to it.
And it's interesting that the King James version of the Bible is so often quoted, against gay people. So that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. It's popular. A man in Poland in the 15th century also, the name that I was able to find was Wojciech. There was no first name associated to it, only that he was minor nobility, and he lived in the city of Poznan, so a fairly large, important city. And he basically just jumped back and forth between living as a man and living as a woman, depending on who his lover at the time was. Then we come into the 18th century, the 1700s. France decriminalized same-sex activity, and that's a big jump, 200 years, and I wasn't really able to get a clean understanding of the changes in that time, other than we are talking about when this change happens. We're looking at 1791. We're right before the beginning of the French Revolution, or right after the beginning of the French Revolution. And they decriminalized same-sex activity, which I assume is just an aspect of we're going through a social revolution. We feel like you're hurting people who don't deserve to be hurt for something they don't deserve to be hurt for. Who you love is who you love, and what's that got to do with society in general outside your house? So then the next big thing I came to after that was right about this same time is when everybody starts sort of trying to colonize Africa. And in the process of doing that, there are a lot of conversations about, what are the societies of Africa like? And of course, that's a pretty disrespectful discourse on the whole, very ethnocentric. We're better than them. We're smarter than them. Our societies are more advanced than theirs. They live in huts. We have schools and, giant buildings, and they're just these little tribesmen off in the woods, off in the savannah. And I wasn't able to find anything that spoke to the history going back in Africa from the 1800s. I just could not find anything. The main thing I was able to find was a book called Boy Wives and Female Husbands, which spoke to when the church and the various explorers got into Africa, their conversations with different tribes and societies about about the things they did, and of course they were spoken of as if their cultures were degenerate and unnatural, because there was openly accepted. This is a man, that is a boy. The man is going to raise the boy to be a better man, but they're going to have sex somewhere in there too. The boy is the student; he learns from the man. There was talk of entire tribes where sex among the men was preferred to sex among the women. You had sex with the women to make sure the tribe continued to exist, but you hung out with men because that was more fun. And I assume that there was something similar to that among the women, but I was not able to find that detail. And I assume, again, because that was not the focus of the missionaries and the explorers. They can grab the women and run off with them and do whatever they want. The men, they have to try to figure out, because that's how patriarchal societies work. Women are a secondary thought, and everything important must be happening through and by the men, even when it actually isn't. And after that, I'm pretty much in the modern era. Like the last thing that I looked at that I really cared about was a detail that had never come up. I was looking at some stuff on Hirschfeld and Falk, and it came up that they were gay. So I sort of started looking through the material, and then it added in Testman and Ulrich, also saying that they were gay. But again, you're talking about some fairly important developmental psychologists who were pushing the idea that who were themselves gay, who were also pushing the idea that homosexuality was not a disease or a failing. It was just a state you were born to. So that would have been turn of the century, early 1900s thinking, or an early 1900s argument in Germany around those issues.
Well,
Which we
let's not get too modern here. Let me go back to as my research was grabbing me too. Thank you for and I knew nothing of because African history is so suppressed, and
yes.
It's it's not surprising you didn't find anything before that, I imagine. But I never heard of that, of the boy wives, I guess they were talking about.
Yeah, and it went. The book was Boy Wives and Female Husbands, because it also talked about how, and I'm forgetting her name now. Of course, I'm forgetting her name, but that one started out with a woman who she held out when the Portuguese first got to Africa and were trying to make their mark and take over. She basically
and what year was that exactly?
Wait a minute. Let me look.
17.
That one I don't have in my notes, and I'm going to have to come back to. I'll jump back to it while we talk.
Well, the colonial period. So I'm kind of jumping in. It's sort of the colonial period of the American Revolution, and that we do know something about naturally, because it's white men documenting what white men are up to.
Right.
So in that 1770s and 80s, around that.
Yeah, 1700s.
So that's
okay. Sure. Her name was okay, and I'm not going to try to pronounce it correctly because I don't know how. It was spelled Njinga, and she led the Matamba people in their resistance, and effectively she held them out for the entire generation of her rulership. Basically,
she
kept
fought
European
the colonialists. Yeah.
Yes, she fought the colonialists and kept them out for something on the lines of 40 years. And she was not the queen of her tribe. She was the king of her tribe, and her husbands dressed as women and served her in their court. Now that in no way speaks to what anybody's sexual preferences were, or, the feminization of her husbands or anything like that. It's just saying that, clearly she said, I'm the king, and I dress as a man because I am a king, and these are my, she decided that her husbands were her wives and they would dress as women. I believe it said that there were 9 of them, and they must have been fairly happy in their roles. I guess they don't have to have been. Plenty of women out there married and miserable.
Okay.
But that was her position in she lived as a man in the practical context. She did not allow herself to be noted as or treated as a woman, which is clearly a political statement.
And there's if we could find it, there's probably a huge history of what went on in Africa and all the different cultures and the huge variety of sex roles, and probably stuff about gay folks and lesbian folks and transgender folks, and all of that was probably very, very common in various sort of manifestations. Now we haven't. My research I picked up, although I was looking at I did go back and look at the Greeks and what they were, because the Greeks kind of set the tone with that bisexuality was very common and normal with the Greeks. But I came in on the Revolutionary War, and we all know that Hamilton the musical has been very popular and has led to more and more reevaluation of what Hamilton was like when he was a young man. He was a major general, the chief of staff for George Washington, who was the primary military leader of the American Revolution. So Hamilton was a trusted confidant of Washington. And he had a group of friends, the Marquis de Lafayette and
Can't forget.
John Lawrence. And the Marquis de Lafayette was another major general. John Lawrence was a lieutenant colonel. And there's a whole series of letters between these three men, which you got to read them. You really got to read them. They sound like love letters. And what it really sounds like is Hamilton is hot for John Lawrence. And it's interesting, some of these letters were purposely destroyed. So, especially the ones from John Lawrence to Hamilton were mysteriously destroyed by the family. And we know that. It's not that they just never happened, as they were destroyed. And John Lawrence's family was much more prominent. Alexander Hamilton was born out of wedlock. He was an orphan. He was raised in the Caribbean and sort of rose up in the Army of Independence. But Alexander Hamilton writes of his deep love and affection and gets very, very intimate in his talk with John Lawrence and how much as he misses him. He tries to get stationed with him in the South, but that's turned down for some reason. There's also lots of letters between Alexander Hamilton and Lafayette. But it's something I want to encourage Americans to read, because it seems pretty obvious to me that these men were LGBTQ of some variety. I don't know where to place them, or does it really matter? But they were very comfortable. All three of them were of a very romantic, extreme intimacy with each other. Whether it was actually a sexual intimacy, we don't know, because they probably wouldn't talk about that. Although if they did talk about it in their letters, although some of Alexander Hamilton's letters are bragging about the size of his penis to John Lawrence, and it's all kind of
Well, that's
a
locker
little
room
bit
talk.
much for your usual heterosexual bros. It feels like a bit much, but there's and by the way, these letters are fully available in their complete. There they are, and you can read them. And there's some excellent. I watched a YouTube video by a guy named Alexander Avila, Avila, about Alexander Hamilton, and he does kind of he puts up the words of the letter, and he does some animation around it. And he's not, pro-gay or anti-gay that I can see. I really couldn't get he didn't seem to have a axe to grind, but he makes this wonderful presentation of this love relationship between Lawrence and Hamilton. And it's quite beautiful, actually, whether it's between two straight men or not. Although when you look at the pictures of John Lawrence, and he don't look straight to me, folks, if that's even possible to know that. But he's very beautiful. He's like, when that saying, you're too beautiful to be straight. Have you heard that one? Heard that talk?
I have never heard that one.
It's so he's a real cute guy. That doesn't mean he's gay, of course. He could be, but he had John Lawrence had no sexual attraction to girls in his adolescence, and that was a concern to his father, who said, "Oh, he's just a late bloomer." Okay, so I'm just talking like a lawyer now, because you can see kind of my axe to grind here. That probably this, and he was a young man. He was 27 years old. He was a lieutenant colonel in the infantry of the American Army that had just been put together. He led a charge of 50 men against a dug-in position of 150 British regulars, and he was killed during that engagement, along with some of his fellow soldiers. And Alexander Hamilton was heartbroken with that. So that's all fact. It's not, not made up. It's not gay propaganda. It's nothing. It's just plain old fact. It's documented in the letters. But of course,
Right.
these men were married. Alexander Hamilton was married, But it's interesting in the letters to his wife, Alexander Hamilton does not appear anywhere near as romantic or thrilled as he is with John Lawrence. So anyway, that's the end of my argument for that. You take a look at it and see which, and also the letters with the Marquis de Lafayette.
Right.
I see your lips moving. I know you're thinking something over there.
Yeah. Well, and the idea that a lot of those guys were literally going after political marriages. Oh, now I can't even think of his wife's name. You'd think I would have paid more attention to the history books and Hamilton, which is just a very catchy production. But his wife was the mother of the governor of the colony. Excuse me, his wife was one of the three daughters of the governor of the colony. So as brides go, he wasn't really going to do better unless he found somebody who was just super rich and otherwise politically connected. He made an excellent choice with her in a time where political marriages were just what they were. So it is super easy for me to see him as a okay, so your son wasn't interested in girls when he was little. You can say that was a late bloomer. You could say he was a member of the He-Man Woman Haters Club, and he just got to it later. Or he could have been bi, he could have been gay, and he just wasn't. He hadn't found anybody he would choose to mess around with. Hamilton found somebody who could move him forward politically, who he also enjoyed mentally, emotionally, and it was an acceptable pairing. So they got married, and then afterwards, wasn't what they wanted it to be. As was pointed out, he does have an affair with a woman down the road, and that turns into a political problem for him later. But I mean, if we've had gay people since before the Common Era, it's completely reasonable that we would have had bi people since before the Common Era. And he was completely and we also know that even in our own society, once you get forward of forward of the 1800s, men's clubs that literally exist so that men can hang out with other men without the influence of outside society, and the fact that so many of these guys were gay, even in a system where they knew they would be punished for being gay. And it was just, be gay, just be quietly gay, dude. Just, be just gay enough that your friends know you're gay and you guys can hang out, but not so gay that we have to say anything about your homosexuality. It's only when it becomes a noise that we can hear that it's a problem for us. And, and we know that's the way it was in England, even if it wasn't that way necessarily in France or other parts of Europe.
Well, we need to keep in mind that the word gay is a 20th century word. I mean, in biblical times, in Greek times, in the Revolutionary War, homosexuality was just not a concept. It was, you wouldn't talk about it as a group of people, or it was something that was not preferable among the dominant society, because the dominant society, the majority society, is heterosexual. But there are probably more what we call bisexual people now than there are gay people now, at least according to Kinsey. But this is really, this kind of discussion we're having is really a discussion of the modern era. It's not something that would be talked about in this way at all. I mean, even going back to the Bible's Leviticus, I mean, the Jewish interpreters of Leviticus and talk about gay people is really not about gay people at all. It's about incest. The Jews were much more concerned about incest between two men rather than incest, or rather than sex between the two men was less of a hot button. It was just sex, period. And then the Jews were considered sex between two related people. Most of the time, that was a problem. Although other times it was encouraged. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of the Bible a lot of the time. And of course, Jesus never talked about it at all. Period. He wasn't didn't care about it, and I would say mostly that it was not a great concern of during the Jewish Christian era that got started. Oh no, coming back to modern times. Okay, if we're going to talk about so during the American Civil War, when this is another little scandalous thing that has come up. Well, that Abraham Lincoln was not all that happily married to Mary Todd.
Right.
And when she was out of town, he was sleeping in the same bed with his bodyguard, Captain David Derrickson, was it? I think that was his name. Let me check here. David Derrickson, a captain in the Union Army. And he shared a bed. And Captain Derrickson wore his nightshirt at night. This was directly observed and reported by first person witnesses. Does that mean he was having sex with Captain Derrickson?
I wouldn't assume so.
Wouldn't assume so, no, because men slept in the same bed back then. They did a lot of the time. And so we could just say, Mitch, he was just getting a little comfort while his wife was gone.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because again, that was a time when men were not expected to be socially spending a great deal. If a man was with a woman, they had to have a minder. There was someone else there to be sure that nothing inappropriate was going on. So we spent a lot more time among men. Speaking our minds and being more open among men, which isn't the same thing as saying, dude, I miss having you inside me is not
good
all
buddies.
the same context. Yeah. Which is
but I'm just being supportive. Just good buddies. Between two men. Then we have the letters from Abraham Lincoln to Joshua Speed. Okay, these were love letters, very similar to what Lincoln was writing, or what Alexander Hamilton was writing towards Lawrence. How much I love you forever, miss you, all of that. And Joshua Speed was an early adult friend of his, which he spent 4 years sleeping with in the same bed as another good buddy. Now, what we don't want to think is that the commander-in-chief of the Union Army, Lincoln, and a captain in the Union Army were doing each other. We don't want to think that our president was, as a 20-year-old, was busy doing Joshua Speed. We don't know. But there seems to be a theme here that we're talking about, Mitch, which is many men were marrying, but also having sex with other men. Now, what does that mean? I don't know. We now have words for that. We would call it something. Back in the 1800s, they would probably say, well, the men, if they wouldn't talk about it, for one thing, probably, especially in America, they wouldn't talk about it, but they would just say, yeah, they were having sex. It wouldn't be right. They were gay. It wouldn't be any identity issues or anything like that. And if we're looking at Greek men, it was just that was what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to have
Right.
a slave boy or some boy that you were, and I don't know how young they were. I think some of them were a lot younger than 18, but a lot of them were they were 18 or 19 or 20 that
Well, that was
they took under their wing, had sex with, and also educated them and introduced them to society and all that, or fought with
right.
them in the wars.
Because their view was more about, they still had the context of, you have given up your manhood because he is mounting you, which was really more about station. You've now made yourself subservient to him, but it's still just sex.
Well, it was patriarchy too. It was like, yeah, if you're the one that's receiving, you're in the lesser powerful role. So
Yeah.
if you're gonna, how can we use the word? If you're going to, what's the word to use? If you're going to be the one having sex, you should be the one that's doing the penetrating, because that's more masculine. That's more you're the more
I think you
powerful
can say
one.
just
That was
don't be a
true with say again.
I think you can say just don't be a bottom. Avoid being a
Don't be a
bottom.
bottom. You got to be a top.
Yeah, I think we can. I mean, we have a different name for it, but that was clearly still the feeling. Although, now we don't have it's you're top, you're bottom, you're a power bottom, whatever. We don't care. You're having sex. And they were just like,
We're kind of
we
going
know.
back to that though. Yeah, we don't
Yeah,
care, because I would think a lot of the time it was just in ancient Greek life. It was the Greek men were on top in every way, unless they were
right.
unless you were a slave and then you were on the bottom. You were
Right. Well,
just
and
you were
I would push,
economically and every other way. Yeah.
well, I would push back on that in the idea that, if you care enough about something to give it a name, then you care enough about it to care about it. Things that don't matter don't have names. There's no category for it. There's no qualification. Um, so their qualifications may have been different, but they did care because they had a social opinion about who was on top.
Yeah.
And we just, our position is every one of those things. We want to know who's on top. We want to know how they're doing it. We want to know how you're dressing and who takes what gender role. And, it's not as open and simple as they're having sex. What more is there to know? Those two guys are having sex. They are a partnership and a team, and whether or not it's because they're having sex or they have sex because they are always together and it's easier than allowing a woman to get between them or in the way, this is their relationship.
Well, it's a power dynamic, isn't it? If the two men are together, that's powerful. And then who has the power within the relationship? Well, in gay culture, it isn't necessarily the top that has the power.
Right.
It could be the bottom as much. It could be more powerful personality wise, or have more money, or whatever. Be more what's the word? Have a higher status of work, or whatever. It's like that's just who you're having sex with is one aspect of power. It's one aspect
Right.
of your position in society. So maybe if you're a Greek male and you're wanting to be in the Senate, you're not going to be able to be a bottom and be open about it, for instance. You're
Yeah.
the power would somehow, that would be a loss of power, of patriarchal power.
Well,
No?
and I didn't see anything that suggested that. What I did see was that, like, I mean, as the person being penetrated, you were lower status in that conversation, and as someone who was being penetrated, you did lose a little cachet in society. But that's not saying the same thing as you were well, that's it. He's the girl now, and women are less than. I mean, it was a women are less than, and you're allowing yourself to be treated as a woman, so your status has fallen a bit. But that's not the same thing as saying you didn't still enjoy the benefits of being a man in a patriarchal society. It was like, there's an asterisk next to your name. Was the feeling I
So
got from it.
maybe it would have been better to be a, well, there's a good question. So in a patriarchal society, better to be penetrated than to be a woman.
Yes.
Because a
Yes.
woman is property, chattel, can be
And can't
sold or
penetrate.
killed.
She's not equipped to penetrate. She will never
Yeah, she
be
can't
on
even,
top.
unless she wears a special device. Never mind.
Which we know they had. We know they were carrying gear. They had options. You can go back to the Egyptians far before. Well, no, not far before them, but the Egyptians in their time and before. They have walls of drawings of such things, along with the Greeks and the
Carrying
Romans.
gear. I love that. Okay. Okay, so well, let's keep moving. Let's keep moving through history now. Now we have the rumors about Eleanor Roosevelt. Have you heard those?
No, not at all.
Okay, Eleanor Roosevelt was the wife of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, not Teddy. It's Franklin.
Right? Not
I think those two presidents were cousins or something. But um, Franklin was nearly totally, what's the word? Not immobile, but he had polio and he could not walk on his own. He was in braces. He was in a wheelchair a lot of the time. Eleanor was a very astute, very bright, well-educated woman who became very, very politically active during the time of FDR's presidency and protected him and saw to his care, but also informed him politically and
Yes.
influenced him in many, many ways, and was very active with women. And she was very close friends with other women, and there were rumors. And when FDR had a major affair with his, I think it was his secretary.
Yeah, secretary was the way I understood it.
There was a big falling out between the two of them. Eleanor didn't leave.
No.
But she's rumored to have a very close relationship and perhaps a more than perhaps a sexual relationship with other women, because there are love letters between her and other women too. So,
hadn't seen or heard anything along those lines.
well, a lot of it is rumor and innuendo. It's not, just as with Hamilton and Lincoln and with her, these letters are not directly sexual. And so one of the things we know for sure is that these three people had deep romantic attachments to the same sex. And romantic, I don't know how to define that. It could be sexual, it might not be. Some romantic relationships are just very, very strong, intimate, close relationships that don't involve sex at all.
Right.
And but I think that's indisputable among those three people that was true. Whether they're sexual, whatever their sexual, or in modern terms, what to call those sexual orientations, I have no idea, and I'm not sure we can make that, because in modern day there seems to be, sex is so vitally important to all of us in our culture that we want to know, was Lincoln really sticking it in Joshua Speed or not? We want to know that, because then we can put that person in a category. and we can then move them up and down in the social hierarchy depending on how we're looking at it. So we'd like to know, but we don't. Bottom line, we don't. Unless somebody was, in bed with Joshua Speed and Lincoln, seeing what they were doing, they weren't, writing newsletters about it or blogs or sending letters to each other about it that we know of. So the decision is out on that. I don't know. But what I think what is cool about it is that these three people in history that are very, not too far off in American history, had very, very intimate same-sex relationships. And so these people loved each other. There's a wonderful book called Men and Friendship by Stuart Miller. He was a book coach for me when I was first learning how to write. And so Stuart Miller was a psychologist like I was. He wrote this book called Men and Friendship. And he was straight, Stuart was. And the men he is talking about in the book are what we would call heterosexual, I think. What his thesis is that people of the same sex can be very, very close to each other and have very intense love relationships. And it doesn't mean they have to be sexual, doesn't mean they don't have to be sexual. It's just that the intimacy is extremely healing between men, and it can be in a very special way, or can be extremely healing between two women. That is lifelong, that has almost a kind of a romantic attachment to it. And if it's sexual, it has a romantic attachment to it. But it doesn't have to. And it's, from his point of view, it's vital for the mental health of men, particularly, to have these very, very close relationships. And he talks about his love relationship with a friend in this book, Men and Friendship. And it's kind of changed my life. And as I was going into my 40s and 50s, told me the importance of really taking time to make closer love. And I have several male friends now, and most of them are straight, as far as I know. I mean, we know each other very, very well. And the three of them I'm thinking of are all totally straight, although what's the word about it? They just don't worry about me. I don't know what it is. My sexual orientation doesn't seem to bother them any, because they know that it doesn't have to be a sexual orientation, doesn't have to be sex with me to be in a loving relationship with me,
Right.
So
right. And there was back when I was in school, there was a report that I was writing, and I read something by a psychologist. I remember his last name was Drescher because I was thinking Fran Drescher. I remember he was a psychologist. He was or a psychiatrist. Now I don't remember which one of those two. He's out of New York, and I used him as a source in something. And I remember the conversation would have happened around 2010, 11, 12, 13, right in that window. And he was basically talking about the idea of being gay versus men who have sex with men, kind of going back to that earlier idea we had that's like, he's on the bottom, but he's not. What they're doing is just having sex. The idea that the militaries in that same time frame, in early history, your shield brother, the guy next to you, was the person that you had sex with. You shared your tent, you shared your lives. You might go out raping and pillaging together, but when it came down to it, it was going to be the two of you. And they were talking about. So yeah, he had a context for that, which right now I am not remembering if he was pro or con that. If he was arguing that as a society we allow people to say it the same way. It's like, well, I was in prison, I had sex with men, but I'm not gay. I was in the military. Me and this guy spent all our time together. We had sex with each other once in a while, but we ain't gay. I
Gee,
don't
what does
remember
that
that.
even mean? Yeah, it's like the word gay starts to lose its meaning. It's like, yeah, people had sex together for a few weeks or something, or when they were 13 with each other, or when they were whatever. What does it mean about you? And it probably doesn't mean anything at all. You could you could just be, if we got out of these categories, it could mean that by and large you prefer women, but every now and then you've had sex with men. What does that mean? I don't know what that means. Even it to me, it speaks to the plasticity and the fluidity of the human mind and the human body, that um, you could have sex in many different ways, under many different situations, with different people, and I would add to that, why I'm now, this is my promoting here. Why on earth do we care? Why is this so utterly have to be so utterly important to us? I think it seems like it was a Buddhist that said this. It said, somebody asked, oh no, it was a Hindu. My buddy asked a Hindu priest about this. He said, well, what sex is difficult for me. I don't know, my wife doesn't want to have it that much, and should I be going out, blah, 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 blah. He went on, and, all the hangups and difficulties and the conflicts that American men have about sex. And
Hmm.
the Hindu priest said, have sex. Don't have sex. Don't worry about it. Because instead of attaching so much meaning to it, but of course, in terms of, the way I look at it, in terms of the ego, the fearful mind, um, always wants to make a big deal about everything. I mean, we can worry and be upset and be angry over so many things. But this is what Marianne Williamson has said. But seems like sex is more so for the ego somehow. It just takes on. We add more meaning to it and make it more important. And um, you do all the things that fear does to separate us from other people and cause conflicts among people, cause wars between the, oh my goodness. There's been wars over sex.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And even if you're not talking about being gay, I was talking earlier about the idea that men hang out in these social clubs, and what happens is just what happens.
Yeah.
Or like I was saying, your shield brother, I spend all my time with this guy. The idea that we have these hang-ups around something that we already know is happening, and we have to find some way to justify it or vilify it or find a version of it that we can, speak to without making ourselves seem or feel less than, when it should just be, that's just a thing that happened. Everybody is agreeable to it. No one's been hurt. Um, so why would this be a big deal at all? At all? Uh,
I keep hoping, when I hear the new generations coming up in California anyway, I don't know anywhere else, but in California, I'm hearing among my grandchildren, among other kids, that this is just no longer an issue. I mean, you may notice that the boy likes other boys or the girl likes other girls. You may notice that your friend is black and you've got pink or white skin, or you may notice that another friend is kind of more masculine or strong, or you may notice all these differences. You do, and you may even kid about them and talk about them and tease other people, tease each other about it. But it seems to have lost a lot of its importance here. These huge
well,
differences.
and I'm largely seeing it from a middle school and a high school perspective. The people that are around me that I work with, they're the ones that I
Yeah.
see, and they're in this really odd category of like they're doing what you say. They're like, no, this is who cares who you hold hands with, who cares who you kiss, who cares who you love, but they still use the same slurs.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Like I've heard, like, okay, so I shouldn't talk about him too much. So I know a young man that has darker skin. He's among Asian people with somewhat lighter but different skin than my white pink skin, whatever. Their skin are somewhat different. They all tease each other about it.
Mm-hmm.
They do racial slurs, and they do all that, at least from his point of view, as not hurtful. He is a distinct minority, and he is not feeling hurt that I can get by it. And there's kind of free range teasing that is not bullying.
Right.
It's not. I hope it's true. I don't know that it's true, but it's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see us all be able to josh each other and kid each other again, and not have one group have this be oppressed and be bullied and violence brought upon
Mm-hmm.
them. And you could get back, that's my thing, is we could get back to loving each other and being kind to each other and appreciating our differences. We're different. Well, so what? We're all humans in this world trying to get along in a very, very difficult place. Where the world of this earth is a tough place. We know this already, and we know how difficult it is with violence and with inequality and all that. We all know all that. But anyway, if you would, we're coming to the end of our little program here, brought to you by Love and Country, my novel. Okay, pick it up you can get it up at the store. It came out from Northampton House Press. Also, you can pick up the movie Love and Country, and one of the stars in it is, guess who? Mitch. You can see Mitch on the screen in Love and Country, and Love and Country is on Tubi and YouTube. It's on this channel. It's on. It's all over the place. You can get it in DVDs. You can buy it at Walmart, for Pete's sake. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. We like that you're listening to us. Take care.